It was the kind of night that pressed against the skin, cold and heavy, the wind whispering secrets that made the hairs on your neck stand on end. Sarah, exhausted from a long week in the city, decided to escape to the remote forest cabin she had rented online. The website had promised solitude, tranquility, and a break from reality. But reality was waiting, hidden just beyond the shadows. The path to the cabin wound through ancient pine trees, their black silhouettes swaying like silent watchers. The moon was a sliver in the sky, barely lighting the way. Sarah's car broke down halfway, leaving her to continue on foot. Each step on the crunchy leaves echoed too loudly, as if the forest itself were listening. The air smelled damp and metallic, and somewhere in the distance an owl cried. Though there were no owls that deep in the forest, she was sure of it. Finally, she reached the cabin. Its wooden walls were weathered and dark, the windows coated with a layer of grime that made it impossible to see inside. The door creaked as she pushed it open, and the inside smelled of mold and old wood. The furniture was sparse, but one thing caught her eye. A journal left on the table, its pages yellowed and edges torn. Curious, Sarah opened it. The writing was jagged, messy, almost frantic. The entries described a presence, something that watched from the corners, whispering her name at night. She laughed nervously, dismissing it as someone's attempt at a scary story. But the last page chilled her to the bone. Do not trust the whispers. They follow you, always. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply. Sarah wrapped herself in a blanket, trying to ignore the strange noises, the creak of floorboards, the tap of something against the window. Then she heard it, a soft, barely audible whisper calling her name. Her heart raced. "Sarah," it breathed. She froze, listening. The whisper came again, closer this time, yet no one was there. The lights flickered, and for a brief moment she saw a shadow moving across the room. It wasn't her imagination. The shadow paused, then disappeared. Trembling, she grabbed a flashlight and aimed it at the corners, but the darkness seemed to stretch and warp, as if alive. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, circling around her like a predator savoring the hunt. Then the journal fell off the table on its own, pages fluttering wildly. The last page was open to a new entry. "I see you. You can't leave, they won't let you. They are hungry." Sarah's scream was swallowed by the forest. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the whispers further into the night. And in the shadows, something waited, patient and unblinking. As the cabin's door slowly creaked shut, Sarah's mind raced as the darkness seemed to close in. Every shadow twisted into shapes that weren't there moments before. The whispers didn't stop. They multiplied, overlapping each other in a chaotic chorus of voices. "Sarah, Sarah," they called now from every corner, every wall, even beneath the floorboards. Desperate, she grabbed the journal again. The pages fluttered violently as if something unseen were shoving them open. One phrase caught her eye, scrawled in fresh ink. "If you see them, they see you. Look away and you die." Her flashlight flickered, and for a split second she saw dozens of shadowy figures pressed against the walls, their hollow eyes glowing faintly. She blinked, and they were gone. Her instinct screamed at her to run, but the cabin felt alive, reshaping itself to trap her. The door she had entered through now led to a solid wall. Panicked, she ran to the window, but the glass rippled like water, distorting the forest outside into a writhing mass of black forms. Something tapped on the glass from outside, slow and deliberate. She couldn't tell if it was a hand or something far worse. A cold gust blew through the cabin, extinguishing her flashlight. Sarah's breath came out in foggy puffs as she groped in the dark, heart pounding. The whispers were now a scream, 1,000 voices screaming her name, surrounding her from every angle. She stumbled backward into the corner of the room and froze. A shadow detached itself from the wall, tall and thin, impossibly still. Its face was featureless, but Sarah felt its eyes piercing through her soul. It stretched a long, clawed hand toward her. She turned to run, only to find the floor beneath her feet was gone. She was suspended in darkness, weightless, the whispers closing in, circling, mocking. Then she felt it, a cold touch on her shoulder and a voice right next to her ear, whispering. "You shouldn't have come here," she screamed, spinning around, but there was nothing. The journal lifted from the table, pages flying madly. One final line was written on the top page. "You belong to the shadows now." A deafening silence followed. The whispers stopped. Sarah's breathing was the only sound, sharp and ragged. She blinked and the cabin appeared normal again, the walls intact, the windows still grimy, the door in place. But she knew the truth. The shadows had claimed her. She would never leave, never be seen by the outside world again. Somewhere deep in the forest, her voice joined the chorus, a warning for anyone foolish enough to enter the cabin after her. And far above, the moon flickered weakly, casting the forest in a pale, indifferent light. The cabin waited patiently for the next visitor. Months had passed, and the cabin remained untouched, a silent predator in the forest. But rumors of strange disappearances began circulating among hikers and adventurers. Some claimed to hear whispers in the wind, warning them away. Others said they saw lights flickering deep in the woods, though the cabin had no electricity. A new visitor, Michael, an amateur paranormal investigator, arrived one evening. Armed with cameras and recording equipment, he wanted proof of the cabin's haunting. The forest around him was unnaturally quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. He followed the same narrow path Sarah had once taken, unaware of the cabin's hunger. When he reached the cabin, the air turned cold instantly. His breath formed clouds in the dim light of the setting sun. The door creaked open easily, but the inside smelled of decay and fear, like the cabin itself exhaled dread. On the table lay a journal, Sarah's journal, open to the last entry. The words stared at him. "You belong to the shadows now." A sudden whisper made him freeze. "Michael!" The voice was soft, almost inviting. He laughed nervously, blaming his imagination. But the whisper grew louder, multiplied by unseen echoes. His equipment began malfunctioning. Cameras and recorders flickered and beeped erratically. He heard a shuffling behind him. Turning, he saw nothing, but the shadows along the walls were moving unnaturally, twisting, forming shapes that shouldn't exist. One shadow lunged, yet Michael blinked and it was gone. Panic gripped him, but curiosity kept him rooted in place. Suddenly the lights, though there were none, flickered. In that brief illumination, he saw Sarah, pale and hollow-eyed, standing in a corner. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She pointed toward the hallway, where more shadows gathered, slowly advancing. Michael stumbled backward, tripping over the floorboards that seemed to ripple like water. The whispers now screamed, overlapping in terrifying cacophony. "Join us, stay forever." The air felt thick, pressing against his chest. He tried to run, but the door vanished. Walls stretched and bent, creating a labyrinth that trapped him. Every turn led him deeper into darkness, whispers chasing him relentlessly. A hand, cold and skeletal, grabbed his shoulder. He spun around, but there was nothing. The journal flew open in front of him, pages flipping rapidly. One line burned into his vision. "The cabin feeds on fear. You are the feast." Michael screamed as the shadows engulfed him. His camera captured the moment, but the recording showed nothing but darkness. His voice joined the whispers, another lost soul trapped forever in the cabin. Outside, the forest remained silent, the moon indifferent, as if it had never witnessed the horrors within. And the cabin waited, patient and hungry, ready for the next intruder, brave or foolish enough to enter. Weeks passed, yet the cabin's forest remained unnaturally silent. Locals whispered about missing hikers, travelers who vanished without a trace. Among them was Emma, a skeptic drawn by curiosity and tales of the supernatural. She carried a flashlight, a recorder, and a notebook, determined to uncover the truth. As she approached the cabin, the temperature dropped sharply. Fog crawled along the forest floor like crawling fingers, and the moon barely pierced the dense canopy. The cabin loomed ahead, dark and silent, yet something about it felt alive, aware of her presence. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of decay and fear. The furniture seemed to lean subtly, like it was watching her. On the table lay the infamous journal, open to a new page, written in ink so dark it looked wet. "They see you. They wait. Fear feeds them." Emma's flashlight flickered as whispers began, soft, tantalizing, barely audible. "Emma, come closer, join us." She tried to laugh it off, but the whispers grew, overlapping into a chorus that echoed from the corners, the walls, and even beneath the floorboards. Suddenly, the shadows in the corners moved. Faces, pale, hollow, and silent, emerged from the darkness. Emma froze as the shadows coalesced into tall, thin figures, clawed hands reaching toward her. One figure stepped closer, and she noticed something horrifying. The eyes were Sarah's and Michael's, their souls trapped, twisted into shadows, forever feeding the cabin. Panic surged. She turned to flee, but the door vanished. The cabin had changed, corridors stretching impossibly, walls bending and breathing. Whispers screamed now, a deafening symphony urging her surrender. The floor beneath her feet rippled like water, and cold hands grasped at her ankles. Emma stumbled into the living room, and the journal lifted itself into the air, pages flying madly. One line glowed in crimson ink. "Fear is your only prison. Scream, struggle, and feed us." The shadows closed in, circling her like predators. Every breath she took seemed to feed them, strengthening their forms. Desperate, she tried to fight back, throwing objects, shouting names, even praying aloud. But the cabin ignored her. It was alive, ancient, and patient, thriving on terror. One shadow reached her face, cold as death, and whispered, "You belong here now." Emma felt herself drawn into the darkness, her body becoming weightless, her vision consumed by blackness. Her screams joined the others, Sarah, Michael, and countless unnamed souls. The whispers calmed, almost satisfied, as the cabin absorbed her essence. Outside, the moonlight cast faint shadows across the forest floor, serene and innocent. But the cabin waited, patient and eternal, hungry for the next curious soul. Its walls pulsed faintly, as if breathing, listening, always ready to whisper. And somewhere deep within, a voice echoed in the darkness, chilling anyone who dared come near. "You will not leave, we never let go." Months passed, yet the forest remained strangely silent. Locals avoided the area, whispering of missing hikers and travelers who had ventured too close. The cabin, hidden deep among the ancient trees, waited patiently, its hunger unending. A group of thrill-seekers, unaware of the cabin's history, arrived one stormy night. Laughter and chatter echoed along the path as they approached, dismissing the rumors as local superstition. But the air turned cold as they neared the cabin. Fog swirled unnaturally around their feet, and the wind carried whispers that made them pause, soft, almost playful voices saying, "Come, come closer." Inside, the cabin was as the stories had described. Dark, suffocating, and alive with unseen presence. On the table lay the infamous journal, its pages open as if expecting them. The words seemed to shimmer in the dim candlelight. "Fear feeds us, curiosity binds you. There is no escape." One of the group, Liam, laughed nervously and dared to touch the journal. The moment his fingers brushed the paper, shadows emerged from the walls, twisting and writhing into figures with hollow eyes. A whisper echoed, louder than ever, "You belong here now." Panic spread among the group as the cabin reshaped itself, corridors stretching impossibly, doors vanishing, walls breathing. The shadows advanced slowly, deliberately, circling them. Each step they tried to take brought them deeper into darkness. Suddenly, flashes of the previous victims appeared, Sarah, Michael, and Emma. Their faces hollow, eyes empty, mouths moving silently as if warning the new victims. The group screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the cabin, leaving them isolated in a world of whispering shadows. One by one, fear consumed them. Hands cold as death grasped at their ankles, whispers licked their ears, and the shadows enveloped them entirely. The cabin pulsed with a terrible life, feeding on terror, growing stronger with each scream. And then silence fell. The storm outside calmed, the wind stilled, and the forest returned to its deceptive serenity. The cabin's door closed slowly, patiently waiting for the next brave or foolish soul to enter. Its hunger eternal, its whispers never ceasing, and its curse unbroken. The legend of the Whispering Cabin continued to grow, a warning carved into the minds of anyone who dared approach the forest. And deep inside, where darkness reigns, the voices of the lost echo endlessly, ready to claim anyone who comes too close. We never let go. The forest remembers. The cabin waits. And now, so do you? The forest seemed calm under the pale moonlight, yet the cabin's dark silhouette radiated a presence that was anything but still. Sarah, Michael, and Emma's souls had joined the chorus of whispers, bound eternally to the cabin. Shadows lingered along the walls like living entities, curling and twisting, waiting for the next visitor. From outside, the forest appeared serene. Birds remained silent, and the wind avoided the cabin entirely. Yet those who dared approach felt a cold pressure in the air, as though the trees themselves were warning them. Any movement near the cabin stirred faint whispers that promised both curiosity and terror. Inside, the walls pulsed faintly, expanding and contracting, subtly reshaping themselves to trap anyone who stepped inside. The journal lay open once again, glowing faintly with crimson letters that read, "Fear feeds the walls. The cabin watches. You are next." Occasionally, a faint figure appeared in the shadows. A glimpse of Sarah, Michael, or Emma, their faces twisted in silent screams. They gestured toward newcomers, warning them, but their gestures were meaningless to the oblivious or the brave. The cabin thrived on fear, consuming screams, twisting reality, and growing hungrier with every heartbeat. Outside, the moon glimmered coldly, indifferent. The forest held its secrets, but the cabin's whispers reached far beyond its walls, promising eternal terror to any who dared enter. A group of adventurers arrived months later, laughing, oblivious to the cabin's dark history. They joked about local legends as they trudged through the foggy forest path. The air grew unnaturally cold, clinging to their skin like icy hands. A faint whisper brushed against their ears. "Come closer." The first to enter, Alex, noticed the journal glowing faintly on the table. Words etched themselves in crimson. Curiosity binds you, fear feeds us. Shadows began to stir along the walls, curling slowly toward the group. Panic crept in as whispers multiplied, overlapping into a chilling symphony. One by one, they were drawn into dark corners. Hands cold as death gripped ankles and shoulders, shadows slithering across floors and ceilings. Sobbing and screaming merged with whispers, feeding the cabin's hunger. The forest outside remained deceptively calm, hiding the horrors inside. By the time the night ended, none of them remained. Their echoes joined Sarah, Michael, and Emma. The cabin's hunger persisted, stronger than ever, patiently awaiting its next victim. Months turned into years. Yet the cabin remained untouched by outsiders, its presence growing more malevolent. The whispers of the trapped souls grew louder, echoing through the walls, warning all who approached. From afar, hikers reported strange chills, unnatural silence, and a sense of being watched. Those who came too close heard faint voices repeating names they didn't recognize, calling them into the darkness. The journal appeared and disappeared, sometimes seen glowing faintly in abandoned tents or along the forest path. Inside, shadows stretched endlessly, forming new shapes with each visitor. The cabin had learned, adapted. Fear had become a living force, feeding the walls, consuming the living, and binding them to the eternal chorus of whispers. The final lines etched themselves into reality. The cabin never sleeps. It waits for the brave, the curious, the foolish. Its hunger is eternal, its whispers endless. And so the forest remained silent, the moon cold, and the cabin patient. Its doors opened only to those destined to become the next voice in the chorus. The next whisper in the eternal horror of the woods years had passed since the first whispers called Sarah, Michael, and Emma into the cabin's relentless darkness. The forest surrounding the cabin remained unnervingly silent, almost unnatural, as if the trees themselves had learned to avoid the cursed place. Travelers occasionally reported strange sensations, sudden chills, a weight pressing against their chest, or the faintest whispers calling their names. But none dared stay long enough to discover the horrors that lurked within. On a stormy night, a solitary traveler named Nathan arrived, armed with cameras, flashlights, and a curiosity bordering on recklessness. He had heard the tales, the cabin that fed on fear, the vanished souls, the endless whispers. Nathan dismissed the stories as folklore, eager to capture proof of the supernatural. The path leading to the cabin twisted violently between towering pine trees, their branches scraping the sky like skeletal fingers. Rain-slicked leaves clung to his shoes, and lightning briefly illuminated the forest in jagged bursts, casting shadows that seemed alive. As Nathan approached, the temperature dropped sharply. His breath formed white clouds in the air. The cabin loomed ahead, silent, its dark windows reflecting nothing, yet somehow revealing everything. A faint whisper carried through the trees. "Nathan!" He froze, convinced the wind had played tricks on him. But the whisper repeated, softer and closer. "Come inside." Inside, the cabin smelled of decay and iron. The journal lay on a dusty table, its pages fluttering even though no wind touched them. Words appeared as if written by invisible hands. "Fear is the key. Only the frightened survive for now." Nathan laughed nervously, recording the entry on his camera, but the shadows along the walls seemed to twist toward him, stretching and curling unnaturally. The whispers intensified, overlapping into a chorus of thousands. He heard the faint, hollow voices of Sarah, Michael, and Emma calling from the corners. The cabin pulsed, walls subtly moving, floorboards rippling beneath his feet. Panic began to claw at him, but curiosity, or foolishness, kept him rooted. Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from the far wall. It was tall, thin, featureless except for hollow eyes glowing faintly red. Nathan's flashlight flickered, illuminating the figures of the previous victims standing silently behind it. Their mouths opened, but no sound emerged. They reached toward him, fingers elongated and skeletal. Nathan stumbled backward, tripping over the floorboards as the cabin warped around him. Corridors stretched infinitely, walls bending and folding in impossible ways. The whispers escalated into screams, deafening, reverberating through his skull. He grabbed the journal, desperate for answers. A new message had appeared. "The cabin never lets go. You belong. All fear is mine." Suddenly, the shadows surged. Nathan felt icy hands grasping his shoulders, pulling him into darkness. He tried to scream, but the sound was swallowed instantly. Panic fused with terror as the shadows consumed him completely. Every scream, every heartbeat fed the cabin, strengthening its presence. The walls pulsed and throbbed like a living organism. Hours, or perhaps minutes, passed. Outside, the storm continued, indifferent. The forest returned to eerie calm, hiding the cabin's horrors from the world. Nathan's camera, still recording, captured nothing but darkness. The journal's pages fluttered closed, waiting for the next soul foolish enough to step inside. In the shadows, Nathan's essence joined the whispers. The cabin's hunger was insatiable, eternal, and adaptive. Each victim added to its strength, each fear feeding the walls, floor, and ceiling. The whispers became endless, echoing not only inside the cabin but reaching into the forest, beckoning the curious and the reckless. The final realization hung heavy in the air. The cabin did not merely trap souls. It consumed them, reshaped reality, and fed on their terror. Any who entered were never truly gone. They became part of the cabin, their voices joining the eternal chorus. The journal, shadows, and whispers were not warnings, they were invitations. And so the cabin waited, patient, eternal, hidden in the depths of the forest. Its dark windows reflected the moonlight coldly. Its whispers traveled silently across the trees. Its hunger never diminished. Every step taken near the cabin was measured, every visitor watched, every scream stored to feed the growing darkness. We never let go, the cabin waits. Its hunger is endless, and now so are you. The forest remained silent, but the whispers continued, reaching just far enough to be heard by those destined to approach. The cycle would continue. Curiosity, fear, and recklessness. The cabin thrived on all three. And deep inside, every shadow, every whisper, and every pulse of the walls promised that no one would ever leave untouched. The forest was colder than it had ever been. Even in the height of summer, the air around the whispering cabin clung to life like the last breath of a dying man, thin, icy, suffocating. It had been weeks since Nathan's disappearance, yet the forest felt heavier, as if it grieved or celebrated. No one could tell. But one thing was clear. The cabin had grown stronger. Far from the forest, in a dimly lit university archive room, a young researcher named Lena Hart pored over dusty records. She had been studying the black pine phenomenon, a series of disappearances spanning nearly 80 years, all pointing toward the same location, a nameless cabin deep inside the woods. Her brother, Nathan, had been the last recorded case. His gear was found weeks later, camera cracked, batteries drained, the lens smeared with black residue that experts could not identify. But Lena recognized one thing in the footage, a voice, a whisper, her brother's voice. "Don't come, don't," the video cut out before the last word. Now she stood at the edge of the same forest, clutching a map and a lantern, her heart thundering violently. The trees towered above her, bending unnaturally, their branches like long, crooked arms. A thick fog brushed against her boots. Somewhere in the distance, an owl screeched, then abruptly went silent, as if silenced by something larger, something darker. Hours passed, the forest path twisting endlessly. Trees grew denser, forming an almost impenetrable wall around her. She felt watched, not by animals, but by something conscious, something ancient. Every now and then, whispers slithered through the air, drifting between the trees. "Lena," she froze. The whispers continued, layered, echoing, calling her deeper. "Come to us," her breath trembled. Nathan had said the same voice called him. Still, she walked on. The path finally opened to a clearing, and there it stood, the cabin. Its silhouette was darker than the night itself, absorbing moonlight instead of reflecting it. The windows looked like hollow eyes, and the wood seemed to pulse faintly, as if the cabin was breathing. Lena's lantern flickered violently. She stepped inside. The smell hit her first, rotted wood, iron decay, and something else, something like fear made physical. The air pressed against her skin, heavy and icy. Her breath formed white clouds. The interior was dim, yet Lena could make out the twisted shapes of furniture warped by unnatural forces. The walls stretched in.